There's no business like show business. There's no business I know. Everything about it's so appealing. But then you get into the nitty-gritty. The long nights with barely any sleep, frequent traveling, press junkets, paparazzi, having every single aspect of your life scrutinized on a daily basis, and especially when you're going against the brand you've established for yourself in order to pursue something that you're genuinely passionate about. It's a narrative about fame that we're all familiar with, that we love seeing explored on the silver screen. Sometimes we see it in the form of a biopic that's crafted from secondhand accounts. Other times we get fictional narrative films that are coming from someplace genuine. I had pretty low expectations going into this film since I kinda broke one of my own rules and took a look at the IMDb page and saw that this film had a 6.6 out of 10. However, some of the negative ratings may have come from the fact that people were probably going into this expecting a traditional comedy from writer-director Chris Rock. I hesitate to call this film a comedy, since it plays out more like a drama that just happens to be about comedians. It's very reminiscent of the Jon Favreau film Chef, where you can tell that Chris Rock is taking cues from his own life to create a narrative that's almost like you're seeing a direct link into his mind. Like there's a lens placed in front of you and you're seeing what's actually going on in his brain. The key difference here is that while Chef was using food and cooking as a metaphor, Top 5 is more straightforward in its approach, as it becomes less about a film that's about the life of the person making it, but more of just an analysis of the nature of show business and the nature of fame in the 21st century. It had a bit of a rough start because I just wasn't quite sure what film I was sitting down to watch. Once I actually kind of began to understand its format, where it's basically just one 2-hour-long conversation between Chris Rock's character, Andre Allen, and the reporter with the various anecdotes being illustrated as flashbacks, I was able to get into it a little bit more. A lot of the film's strengths comes from the dialogue and the acting. At least that's what stood out the most to me. A lot of the actors that were brought into this film, even ones that were doing very brief cameos, all turn in some pretty good performances. While there are some strong visual moments, they don't really carry that much artistic depth to them, as they're more or less done in service to the story, as they're more or less fueled by various plot points and beats that were introduced earlier in the film. It's not like a case of, where there's like certain significant imagery. It's just the case that the cinematography, while making somewhat of an image, is more making an image that reinforces what we've learned about the characters over the course of the film, and just the story that it's telling. It's not trying to make something artistic, it's just a case of saying, okay, well here's these images that are helping us tell our story. It's not really utilitarian because it does have a bit of a unique identity to it, but that's really what it feels like, is that whatever strong visual cues we have are really more narrative driven than artistically driven. If there's one nitpick I have, it's that there are some times in the film where it uses voiceover to get some of its main points across, instead of letting the situation or even the expressions of the actors communicate the weight of the scene, to really let the scene itself speak for itself. And it's also kind of desperate to hammer in the point that this is a film about a comedian that's trying to promote a serious film, a serious endeavor, but is constantly being overshadowed by his reality TV star girlfriend and all the antics that she's getting involved in with the show. And it sometimes even comes dangerously close to making the subtext into text, which is really not a good thing to do because it shows that you don't really have that much faith in your audience. Overall, this film was a pleasant surprise. It's an engaging story that at its heart is about people with baggage trying to cling to an idea of an identity. It's kind of reminiscent, at least based on my understanding, this is pretty much a film that's going to appeal to people that like that show Louis, starring Louis C.K., as there are certain moments that are presented in almost a verite style, where there aren't any major dramatic or comedic cues, and just presents the situations as they are, and lets the actual situations and the absurdity of those situations create much of the comedy. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were times where it used voiceover to try to get points across. That was more for the dramatic scenes, not necessarily the comedic scenes. It did really well in letting the comedic scenes speak for themselves, but not really the dramatic scenes. The humor does get a bit raunchy at times, so be prepared to be a little bit grossed out and possibly cringing with empathy from here and there. I mean, I know it may seem kind of dumb to have that kind of disclaimer, oh yeah, this thing has raunchy humor, but given that I live in Utah and I've seen some people really flip out when they're coming into a film that has some raunchy and some fairly gross humor that they're not prepared for, I feel it's important to have that sort of disclaimer, is that although it's not completely bad and out there like this is the end, there are some moments that are pretty raunchy, somewhat gross, but also very painful to watch that may pull you out of the experience if you're not prepared for it. All of that said, Top 5 gets a 4.5 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.